Welcome to JavaScript Programming Concept 1. In this video, we're going to introduce variables, which is a concept that exists in all programming languages because it allows us to store, represent information in our programs. This information inherently has some type to it, so we'll discuss that. And we'll also review the idea that we can assign values to variables. Again, that's their purpose, to have value. We're going to introduce a new area to our development environment, which is the console. So let's get to it. So if we go to W3 Schools, we'll see that, it pretty much like we said at the beginning, they store values, data values. And variables can have, different combinations of letters and numbers to represent these variables. Typically in a math class, you'll deal with X, Y, and Z, A, B, C, but you might find it more useful to, make your variables a little longer, a little more descriptive. There are a couple ways of declaring variables, letting the computer know, hey, I'm going to use a variable. As you saw in the first part of this page, before 2015, we would use the word var. But since then, two other ones have been introduced, which are the let and the const. I'm going to focus more on the let, but realize there's three options for creating variables. At this point, I want to head over to Replit and let's practice. So just to kind of set the stage, this is what we have. I have an event listener called onload, which will call the practice function when the page loads up. This would be a great way for us to explore in that there's nothing to interact with on the page. What we're going to use this area called the console. And let me demonstrate what this is. So here's a new command, console.log. This is going to log whatever information we put next inside the console. Now, this area is not meant for users. This area is meant for developers. So it's a great tool for you as a web developer, but realize you're not going to use this area to interact with with your visitors. So let's simply do our traditional hello world to just introduce how console.log works. And there you go. So this is similar to us using the alert, except that the alert's annoying. It's a pop-up that you then have to close. Console log just pops up in this window. There's nothing to close. It's a little easier to read. So we're going to use this console log throughout this video to explore variables. So let's create a couple of variables. So we'll say var x is equal to 10. Then let's do a let name equal to Castro. And let's use the last version. So let's say constant is equal to GPA. And we'll set that equal to 4.5. Okay, so we have three variables here, each representing a different type of information. And let's just display them. So we're going to display X. And we'll display each one on their own console. Again, there's other ways of displaying, so I could simply use one, but I want this video to focus strictly on variables. So we're not going to get the values of X, name, and I should say, we're not going to get the actual X, the words name and GPA. These are variables. They represent values. So the X represents a 10, the name represents Castro, GPA is 4.5. So when we run this, that's actually what we get. So realize when you use variables, they represent values. And that's what you're going to get when you use the variables. Now, some young programmers, beginner programmers, will do this by accident. They will put their variables in quotations. Now, once you do that, then this is no longer your variable. This is a string. So if you do this, you will get those words, X, name, and GPA. So realize when you work with variables, don't put them in quotations. Once you do that, then it's no longer the variable, but the actual string of whatever that name is. So let's review a couple more variables, types of variables that you may interact with. So we got this, which is called a Boolean. So let me do these as comments. Obviously this is an integer, a whole number. This is what's called a string. This is called a float because it has a decimal in it. And this is called a Boolean variable. And let's go ahead and print that one out too. Now, there's a lot of different variables that you can work with, some that you're going to learn as we go, some that you might know from some other languages such as lists, arrays, dictionaries. Again, I'll leave that as an exploration for you later on. Again, if you're familiar with programming concepts, all of those exist in JavaScript. If this is your first programming language, then just feel comfortable with these first four basic types of information. Again, the other ones will come as you explore those concepts in JavaScript. Now, another nice thing we can do is, let's say we have a variable, but we don't know what type it is. JavaScript has a function called typeOf, which will tell us the type of the variable. Now, I would say more times than not, because you're the programmer, you'll know it, but sometimes there'll be input that comes in that you won't be responsible for. So you will then have to determine what type of input it is. So we can see here x comes back as a number. So it doesn't make the distinction between an integer and a float. There are other ways of determining if something's an integer or a float. Let's do the type of name. And we see that comes back string. And then let's do passing. And it comes back as Boolean. So variables represent information. Again, we see here we have an integer, a string, and a float. We have a Boolean here. I can reassign a variable a new value. Now, just to show you the dynamic nature of JavaScript, you can see here that var x equals 10. I'm going to make it equal to no now. So if I do a console log of x, what am I going to get? Am I going to get the 10? Am I going to get the no? Am I going to get 10 no? Let's see. So notice I get the value of no because the x has been reassigned a value of no. So it lost the value of x. Now, honestly, I don't know why I would do that in a program, but just to show you the dynamic nature of how variables work. In some other languages, you can't do that. Once a variable gets its value and it has a certain data type, that's it. That's all you can use it for. JavaScript will let you not just reassign it to a new value, but a new data type as well. And I think we're ready to end it. Again, there's a lot more that you can explore. I wanted to keep this short, and what I want you to take away from this is that variables store information, and you can use the var, let, or const prefix to let the computer know that, hey, I'm going to create a variable, and this is what it equals to. We saw how there's a new area to add to our toolbox, which is the console. It's a great way for programmers, for developers, to get some quick output just to test out their programs. Variables are dynamic in that we can assign them a value and a data type, but then we can reassign them a value and a new data type. Again, with experience, you'll see how variables work. And I will tell you in the next couple of videos, we will explore variables from a mathematical point of view, which is what you're comfortable with probably from an algebra class. So hopefully you're excited about working with variables. Variables are very powerful, and enjoy.